Hello book lovers and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I'm here to go through the worst books that I read in 2023. Alright guys, it is a time to see what books just didn't work for me this year. Luckily, I only found 6 books where I was like, yeah, I would not recommend those books. I don't understand how people like them. I was disappointed. I wasn't having a good time. They were not it. I will say that this was kind of a mid-year when it came to reading, so I didn't feel overly positive about a lot of books, but I also didn't feel overly negative about a lot of books. So I guess that's, the silver lining of it. But today we will be going through these books that I did not like. As a disclaimer, most people put this at the beginning of any videos where they're going to talk negatively about books. Obviously, if you like these books, that is fine. They just didn't work for me. This is my opinion. This is Natalie's channel. So if you don't want to hear me talk bad about your books, then maybe just skip if I come across one of them. That being said, I did put these in order. When it comes to my best books of the year, it could fluctuate a little, but I would say that this is a pretty solid order that I would probably usually put them in, especially when it comes to the worst of the worst books. But I will be starting with my favorite of the least favorite and then moving my way to my least favorite of the year. So up first we have Final Girls by Riley Sager. This is my 4th book that I've read by this author, and it has been a roller coaster ride. This author sometimes grabs me throughout the whole story, sometimes they grab me at the beginning of the story and lose me at the end. And in the case of this book, they had me bored out of my mind for the majority of the book, but I did find that the ending was rather entertaining, hence why it is at the top or the bottom of this list, depending on how you want to talk about it. But in this book, we are following a woman who is a final girl. She went out to a cabin with some of her friends, and all of her friends were killed, and she survived. It has been a few years since this has happened, and she is just trying to live a normal life, which can be very difficult when the media has kind of put her on this stage as being a final girl. She's absolutely not interested in being a final girl, but one day one of those other final girls ends up dying, and she may just need to face her past again. I feel like one of the problems with this book is that I just didn't like the characters, and there are certain scenarios definitely where it is totally okay not to love a character. They're supposed to be unlikable, and I don't exactly think that these characters are supposed to be likable. They're flawed, they're messed up, they're traumatized, but I still want to root for them, and I just felt I had zero interest in this person's life. I had no interest in her romantic relationships. I had no interest in her relationship with the other final girl that came to stay with her after the death of the first final girl, and I honestly didn't have much interest in the flashbacks that occurred during this time, exploring her experience in the cabin and what led up to the murders. I didn't feel bad when I had to watch all those people get murdered, because honestly they all kind of sucked. So I was like, maybe you kind of deserve to die, at least some of them did. And it was just such a weird experience reading this book, just exploring all these people's traumas and seeing all these horrible things happening and just like not caring at all. I was like, wow, go Riley Sager, literally give me nothing. And that's what this book gave me. I will say that the ending took me by surprise. Maybe I felt kind of mad about the story because I was like, well, obviously I know what happens, and I was wrong. So I was standing there looking real stupid by the end. But overall, I think that the story just left me very underwhelmed, especially since I have enjoyed Riley Sager's work in the past, and so I do hold him to a certain standard. Book 2 on this list is going to be Wolf Gone Wild by Juliet Cross, and I honestly keep forgetting that I read this book. Like, it's gonna be really hard for me to talk about it because I remember just about nothing about this book except that I was not having a good time while reading it. This is a kind of cozy, I guess, paranormal romance. It's part of a series where I'm assuming we're following a romance for each sister of this little witch coven. And in this book, we are following Evie. And Evie is, I believe, a curse breaker of sorts. And one day a werewolf comes to her saying that he has been cursed so that his wolf cannot come out, and because his wolf has been trapped inside of him for so long, this wolf is now able to make himself heard in Mateo's head. And that's very annoying because the wolf is very annoying. I was really hoping that it would have kind of this humor, maybe be a little bit like Wolf Song by TJ Klune. It was not. The wolf was annoying. I was like, dude, I'm here with Mateo. I want you to shut up. Please stop talking. I kind of didn't understand the romance. I was like, I guess you guys like each other, but I don't see it. I just felt very underwhelmed by the story. I also felt like while it's totally okay to kind of give us hints at who the future couples were, the author put in so much work for us to be like, oh, here's another couple, here's another couple, aren't you so excited to read the next books in my series? And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm trying to focus on this couple. Okay, can you focus on this couple and make me actually enjoy them, because I'm not. I think that the writing didn't really do anything for me. Everything was just kind of bland. Didn't care about the romance, didn't care about why our wolf was cursed or anything along those lines. And overall, it was just a really forgettable story because that's all I can tell you about it because I don't remember anything else. Not a good time. Definitely decided not to continue with the series, and I don't think that this is an author that I will be trying again. Next, we have Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. So in this book, we are following a couple, and they won a trip to a refurbished church that has been kind of converted into a, not really a bed and breakfast, but like an Airbnb kind of situation. And it is located out in the middle of nowhere, and it's very snowy and stormy, and they seem to be out there in hopes of kind of repairing their marriage because it is on the rocks. However, when they are there, it starts to seem like maybe they didn't win this trip so randomly, and that someone wants them there so they can mess with them. This was a book where the entire time I was reading it, I was kind of like, I could just DNF it. Like there was so many points in this book where I would have been more than happy to DNF it. I don't know why I didn't. I think I was using it for a prompt for a readathon, which is probably why I pushed through. Also, the fact that I was listening to it via audiobook really helped, but the story just never gripped me, and I just felt like I, once again, didn't connect to any of the characters. I wasn't invested in their safety, their well-being, their capacity to survive this situation whatsoever. And I also felt like the kind of climax, the twist, you could say, left me so confused that I just kind of sat there listening to it, kind of trying to wrap my head around it. So I have a feeling that this was supposed to be like an impactful twist where you were really supposed to be like, oh my god, I did not see that coming. But I was just standing there like, it was like, it was that meme where like there's all the math equations around her. The way that the twist was written was not smooth, and it did not work for me whatsoever. And you know, I feel like in a way it is an interesting concept, but at the same time I felt like it was just a little dumb. I read that and I was like, the story's a little dumb. I'm gonna be honest. I think with thrillers, one of the scary parts is where you're like, oh crap, that could actually happen. And I feel like if this were to happen, it's happening to someone who's kind of dumb, and maybe then they had it coming. So this thriller just didn't work for me. I was like, choices were made. And I at this point, don't foresee myself reading another Alice Feeney book. Next book on this is a manga, and that's A Perfect World by Ria Ruga. Now, I'm holding up volume 8. I haven't read this volume yet, so no hate against volume 8. But specifically, the volume I'm talking about is a volume 6, but I get these from the library, so that's back at the library where I don't have to see it anymore. And this is what I'm assuming is advertised as a romance manga between a girl and a boy that she knew in high school, and they reunite years later, and she sees that he is in a wheelchair at this time but would like to go ahead and start a relationship anyway because she had a crush on him all those years ago. Is this a romance manga? Meh. A little bit. I mean, I definitely think that it is a romance at some points, but for a lot of the manga so far, for the first like 7 volumes, they're actually not really in a relationship. And I feel like I was expecting one thing going into this manga and I just was not getting it. It's only 12 volumes long, and I'm like, is this gonna be one of those situations where they don't get together until like the very end? And I'm just not interested in reading about that. I will say that this has good disability representation in it, and if you're wanting a manga with disability representation in it, you should definitely pick it up. But I will say the disability representation is the strongest aspect of this story, not so much the character relationships. I am still continuing this series because there's been volumes that I've enjoyed a lot more. Volume 6 is the one that's the worst of the year. It was a 2.5 star read, but there was a lot of 3 stars, 3.5 stars throughout there. So I'm hoping that the couple actually gets together and that the story will then pick up a lot more for me. I think that the author has just dragged out this breakup for a way too long, and I understand that they had a lot to work through, but it's just kind of weird, especially because they're dating other people, and I'm like, you have them together on every cover. They're like hugging each other on the cover, but they're like not together, and I was like, this is false advertisement. And that is the main reason that this book is on this list. I do think that it has the potential to be something really great, but that we are just dragging on, and that it is getting a little bit repetitive at this point. Up next, the second to last book on this list is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. Yep, Riley Sager made it on this list twice, and this is not the kind of list you want to be on twice. This book, I believe I read before Final Girls, and I read this for my Vlog Squad challenge, so sorry to the person who rated this 5 stars and made it one of their best books of 2022, and then I read it and said, nah, this is my worst book of 2023. And in this book, we are following a woman who I believe is an alcoholic, and she decides to spend some time at her family's cabin. I want to say her husband died and she just never really recovered from that, so she's gotten a bit messy, and her mom was like, you need to go to the cabin, you need to get your life together and all that jazz. And across the lake there is another house, and she sees that there is a couple staying there, and I think one of the women is relatively famous, and so she starts spying on them, and I think then she notices some weird stuff happening. For me, the story was a little bit all over the place. I think I really struggled with the structure of the story. I think we were kind of jumping around quite a bit, where sometimes it took me a while to get my footing, to realize what the heck was going on, or where we were, or who we were dealing with, and it was just a bit confusing at times. This has a bit of a trope, and I know we have a non-reliable narrator. She's a drunk. And sometimes they don't always relay the information that we need, but I also feel like towards the end we were learning all of these things, which, considering we were literally in the head of the character, we should have known. No matter how drunk she was, I was like, there's no way that she would have just not thought of this at least once during any of these other scenarios, that this thought would have just not crossed her mind. And so it felt very much like lazy writing for me, where the author was just like, I'm gonna withhold this information so I can do this twist later in the book. But like, why don't we have that information? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, considering whose point of view we were reading from, we should have had that information. So I really didn't like this book. I felt like I was pretty disappointed even when we got to the big twist, and I was like, okay, well, this was pretty whatever, you know, but we're almost done. And then he added like an extra twist where I was like, okay, now we've gone too far. Like, now things are just kind of ridiculous. Things are kind of dumb. You should have just stopped at one twist. You should have just finished the book. Should have quit while you were ahead, even if you weren't very ahead. And it was just left me so disappointed and rolling my eyes. And I was like, okay, we're done with this book. Not a good time. It was one of the few 2.5 stars that I gave this year. All right, guys, time to get into my worst book of the year. And this was the worst book of the year. It is. No matter how much I may shuffle the rest of the list, this is going to be in the #1 spot. And it's weird because this was a novella for a series that I really enjoyed. In fact, I read the last book of this series earlier this month and had a great time, even despite hating those novella. I just pretend this novella doesn't exist and that I never read it. And that is The Emperor of Evening Stars by Laura Thalassis. And this is 3.5 of the Bargainer series, and this follows the perspective of Desmond, I believe is his name, and he is the love interest in this story. In the story, we are following Callie, and she is a siren, and she one day calls upon the Bargainer after she kills her stepfather, and the two of them become, I guess, friends, you could say. The Bargainer is someone who you can bargain with. You know, you request something and he gets it done for you, but then you owe him a favor, and those favors are usually pretty steep, and most people only have 1 to 2 beads from him, which are placeholders for those favors. However, Callie has hundreds because she has been calling upon him to just spend time with her. She is incredibly lonely because she is a siren. She is seen as someone very dangerous because she can glamour you, meaning she can essentially tell you to do something and you have to do it. So people are kind of like, we're gonna stay away from her. One day she makes a request of the Bargainer that asks him to always stay by her side. And Desmond's magic ends up accepting this bargain, but against his will, it decides the price. And the price is that they need to spend 7 years apart. Most of the series takes place after those 7 years have passed and Desmond has returned to her. Now, this novella follows, I would say, from the beginning of book 1 all the way through the end of book 2, but we are following it from Desmond's point of view. We get some of his past before he meets Callie, kind of how he became the Bargainer, and we also get to spend some time, unfortunately, with him when he's with Callie at the beginning of their relationship. And at the beginning of their relationship, she's 16 and he's hundreds of years old. Yep. Pedo vibes, 100%. I will say throughout the rest of the story, I can ignore that. I can't see it. Everything's fine. But during this novella, it was just giving me the biggest ick, because when we're falling from Callie's point of view, it's very easy to be like, yeah, she's got a crush on him. He's an older guy. He's hot. He's tough. He's one of her few friends and someone who actually accepts her for who she is. And he's just there as a good friend, maybe even a brotherly kind of situation. But from his point of view, you can very much see how he's kind of trying to hold back from feeling certain things. And you're like, you should just not feel it. You shouldn't even be trying not to feel it. Like, you should just not feel it. She's 16 years old, and the fact that they are like hanging out in her room alone is just weird. Like, any mother, any guardian, if they ever saw their 16-year-old daughter hanging out with some 400-year-old dude in like black ripped jeans, they would take him by the scruff of his neck and throw him out of the house. I'm not even kidding. It was just like the most uncomfortable situation to read this book. I was just like, I wish I never read this. And I feel like you could probably continue the series without reading this. Totally fine. I would suggest doing that because it was so terrible. And it took me a while in book 3 to actually start supporting Desmond again as her partner because I hated him so much in this novella. I was like, I feel like you're grooming her. Like, it felt like a grooming situation, and it was like genuinely uncomfortable, and I was so distracted by that I didn't care about anything else that was happening in the story. So, worst book of the year because Desmond Flynn, or whatever his name is, was a creep. So, no thank you. All right, guys, so those were my 6 worst books of 2023. We'll see how the next year goes. Hopefully I will once again struggle to get a lot of books for my worst videos because I don't want to read a lot of books that I hate. I would also love to know what your worst books of the year were. And as always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!